Can cannabis help with meditation? In all honesty, it is high time that I made this video. I feel like I have a very unique perspective on this topic because of my experience with using cannabis over the years and also doing a lot of meditation. After a lot of personal experimentation and contemplation on this question, it's complicated, okay? It's a very complicated question, and I have a very complicated relationship with cannabis, personally speaking, so I want to share some of the perspectives that I have on this topic in this video. So the first thing that we need to know is that whether or not you use cannabis as a spiritual tool is completely individual to you and your own path. And so no matter what I say, or no matter what anyone else says, you ultimately have to trust your own intuition, your own inner guidance to figure out what you need on your path. And if that means that you need to use cannabis for a particular period of time, then hey, that's what you need to do. If that means you need to abstain from it, that also means that you have to have the awareness of your intuition to be able to listen to those signals that are telling you that you need to stop. But for my own personal experience, can cannabis help with meditation? Yes, absolutely, in the short run, when it is used correctly. And that's part of what we'll be getting into in this video. Can it help with meditation in the long run? Well, it's complicated. My bias, my ultimate opinion is that no, in the long run, it actually hurts our meditation progress. And I'll also be addressing that in this video. But again, we have to be able to trust our own inner guidance. And the other thing to consider is that with any kind of psychoactive drug, it's going to affect people differently based on our genetics, based on our karma, based on our conditioning growing up, based on where we are. And just for complete transparency's sake, what is my own personal experience with cannabis? Essentially, I was using it every day from about the ages of 20 to 23. I started using when I was about 19. On my 19th birthday, I experimented with it. That was one of my birthday gifts, was getting high. And it fit like a glove. Like, my relationship with it immediately off the bat was that, wow, I had no idea that I could feel this good. I had no idea that my mind could be so creative. I had no idea that I could be so contemplative. I feel like I was already someone who thought deeply about things, but it felt like when I used cannabis, like, it took it up a notch. And especially that first time that I used, I was just floored by how amazing the altered state was. And so basically this led me down a road where I was, how I would now define it to be, I was addicted. Like, I was addicted to using cannabis, getting high, contemplating about reality, thinking about things deeply, being couch locked and listening to really cool music, enjoying really good food while I was high. I mean, typical stoner stuff, but also using it in such a way that I felt like I was advancing myself, spiritually speaking. It allowed me to get into states that were, for all intents and purposes, stronger than my natural sober state. I was able to relax and sink in and question things from a different point of view and look at the world in a different way. And I feel like it was incredibly valuable with those lessons early on. So this brings us to the first point: can cannabis help with meditation? And like I said, I absolutely think that it can in the short term. Now, why is that? Well, it's because when you use this drug, it augments your sense of reality and heightens your perceptions. So sights are more intense, sounds are more vivid, flavors on the tongue are more intense. Everything is just amplified and turned up a notch. And especially depending on the strain, you can get incredibly sharp senses, almost to the point of psychedelic levels when using them. What this allows us to do is it allows us to glimpse at what high levels of mindfulness are like. It's almost like cannabis allows us to step in to what years and years and years of meditation practice are like without actually having to do the work. So in that sense, it can help paint a vision of where we are going on the path. The other really nice thing about this altered sense of perception is that it allows us to see that how we are in our baseline state of consciousness is just a small sliver of a vast, infinite spectrum of possibilities when it comes to what our states could be like. Now, cannabis is not quite as powerful as something like magic mushrooms or LSD when it comes to ingraining this insight about the profundity of altered states of consciousness, but it certainly allows us to glimpse that, and it allows us to glimpse that in a very powerful way. And especially when you start introducing different strains and observing with deep awareness how they affect our systems differently, you can explore a very wide range of possible experiences while high. And again, it's very nice because we get to experience this without actually having to have, committed to all of the work with meditation. That's one of the advantages. I personally also think there is intrinsic value with exploring altered states. That's sort of just one of our birthrights as human beings. We have this amazing capacity with our minds to explore different forms of reality, and it really starts to beg very deep ontological questions about what is the nature of reality, what is the nature of existence, what is the nature of life itself? Like, why is it that I can experience life one way and then have a completely different, very radical experience of life in another state? What does that say about the nature of life and reality that I can shift so radically? So this has very deep ramifications for meditation practice. And I think when you have experience with this, when you are comfortable in entering into altered states, this allows you to go more deeply in meditation. If things come up during your meditation sessions, very powerful experiences, you're not caught as off guard, and you're able to traverse that territory much more effectively because you sort of have this reference point of what is possible with your mind. As someone who has used cannabis very regularly at certain points in my life, I'm talking like I would wake up, get high, go to work high, get high on the job, like basically be high all day, every day. As someone who has used cannabis to that extent, I want to just provide this warning message that we are playing with fire if we allow this drug to enter into our lives to that extent. There is a difference with using a substance as some sort of sacred sacrament and using a substance for entertainment, recreation, and as basically just our baseline state. And if we allow ourselves to use cannabis to such an extent that it becomes our baseline, that we don't even feel normal without it, that is when addiction can start to become a problem. And what makes this even trickier is that cannabis addiction is not like other addictions. When you stop smoking weed, it's not like you have physical withdrawal symptoms. It's not like your body starts fighting you and you start getting like headaches and like you're all tensed up and in pain. It's not like that. You don't experience body pain at all. All that you experience is emotional and psychological withdrawal symptoms, which are much more subtle and sneaky. They hide much more in the unconscious mind than these other types of withdrawal symptoms from harder drugs. If we allow ourselves to slip into that type of relationship with cannabis, it can be very damaging to the mind. It can be very damaging to our meditation practice. And so that's ultimately what I want to kind of point out is long term, what are the consequences of heavy usage? What I have observed for myself, for my own practice, is that there are very subtle fluctuations in the mind that we need to have the awareness and the capacity to become aware of with our meditation practice, because it allows us glimpses into our unconscious mind. It allows us to purify our mind at very deep levels. It allows us to work through emotions that we may not have been aware that we were holding on to or that we were going through. When we use cannabis, it dulls our attention and it dulls our awareness. It basically creates this filter. We might think of it as creating a filter or creating a barrier between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, such that the information exchange that takes place and the increase in that information exchange that takes place as a result of our meditation practice starts to slow down. It starts to get disrupted from the use of cannabis. So while on the one hand, when we're high, we are able to slip deeper into, very profound altered states where our subconscious mind or our unconscious mind starts to surface, while that is true, after the high is over, there's this residual barrier between those two, and that's the best metaphor that I can use to describe it. This is very problematic because it means that we're going to have slower meditation progress. And the other thing that's worth pointing out long term is that the states that we can enter into from meditation being completely sober are ridiculously, and I want to emphasize that word, they are ridiculously more powerful than anything that we can experience with cannabis. Again, this is coming from someone who has explored both very deeply. The pristine nature of our attention and awareness from sober meditation practice, the subtlety of our experience that we can start to pick up on as a result of our meditation practice, it is unmatched when we can start to build momentum. Now, I will say that kind of momentum with our meditation practice is most likely only achievable if we are going on retreats at least once a year, if we're exploring meditation in a retreat setting. So I would highly recommend you guys that are interested in pursuing meditation really hardcore to start going on retreats at least once a year. I think that's a good schedule that most people can commit to if they're serious about this work. But the types of states that we can get into from meditation are far superior than that of what we can experience with cannabis long term. And I want to emphasize long term. From a certain point of view, using drugs on the spiritual path is, in a sense, spiritual materialism. We are chasing after experiences that feel more mystical than our mundane, ordinary sense. We are trying to escape how we feel in the moment and chase after something else. And yes, there is a difference between using something like alcohol and using something like cannabis. I would say cannabis is incredibly more contemplative and useful for philosophy, contemplation, mysticism, spirituality, meditation, etc. than something like alcohol is. But ultimately, the chasing of experience, that the principle of the matter is that we're seeking something other than what we have right now. And what I will say is, when we have a very robust meditation practice where we are capable of producing altered states on demand, and where we have purified our minds to no longer have much of a preference between radically blissed out, profound mystical states and just our everyday ordinary life, when we can see the profundity, the mystical nature of the ordinary experience, that is spirituality. Like, that is where the spiritual path goes. And so just understand that if cannabis is a part of your spiritual path, it may very well be useful for you in the short term, but more than likely there will come a point where, if you are consistent with your meditation practice, and if you're meditating sober and really, giving it your all, meditating like an hour a day, going on retreats, these kinds of things, maybe going through periods where you meditate more, that kind of stuff. If you're serious about this, there most likely will come a point where your intuition is telling you that it's time to put down cannabis, because you're not going to go where you're ultimately moving from a result of your meditation practice if you continue to chase after it, if you continue to use it in an irresponsible way, in a way that, again, has been habituated as just a way of life rather than as this sacred medicine. And so the last thing that I would just like to say is, again, we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to trust ourselves to know when to stop, when to keep going with this tool of cannabis. But we also need to keep up our meditation practice and make sure that we are being honest about what our practice is telling us, that we're open to receiving that feedback, that communication between the subconscious mind and our conscious mind as a result of our practice. I'll go on ahead and wrap the video up here. I don't know if you guys hear it, but one of my neighbors he's doing something. I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing something. So, good stopping point. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, please leave them in the comment section below. If you like this style of content, please subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video. Until next time.